We all are strange. Did you know that all of us, everybody in this room, that you can be difficult to get along with? Can I get an amen? Amen. Some of you are looking at your spouse like, really, me? Yeah, really. To all the young people that are here, and Fern, I'm going to give you, listen, if you should take out your phone or a piece of paper. I'm going to give you the best advice today. If you're in a relationship or getting ready to be in a relationship, or if you are in a marriage, I would really encourage you today. There was a man in 2017. He's retired. And he robbed a bank. And he robbed the bank and then he waited for the police. And when they asked him why he robbed the bank and waited for the police, his answer was this: I'd rather be in jail than at home with my wife. And the judge sentenced him to 6 months house arrest. Talk about backfiring. Here's the truth. You better think through your plan a little better. Here's the truth. Every woman in this room, I would pretty much guarantee every woman, whether you're a teenager or whether you're older and you've been married, every woman has dreamed about being married. They dreamed about the perfect wedding, what they would wear, the perfect house. Lots of women even dream about, what they'll name their kids. And I'm going to have kids and I'm going to name them this and name them that and all of those things. And women dream of this perfect day. And you could be 12 and maybe 12 years old today and you're thinking already ahead, oh, it'll be the perfect day. And the women are looking at me like, yeah, that was me. When men dream, it's different. When young men dream, teenagers, when they dream about getting married, all they dream about is having sex twice a day. And they're still dreaming. And so, but the truth is, come back to me. But the truth is, men and women are very different. Not only in marriage relationships, but dating relationships, even in friendships. They can be very, very different. The truth is that depending on who you read or what you read, 50% of marriages don't make it, roughly, give or take on either side. Of those, if we're honest, of those 50% that do make it, many are miserable. And the truth is, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. That the truth is, something is not working. Something is not working within our marriages. And I really believe that it is possible to have an amazing marriage. Whether you are married today and your marriage is okay or not okay, or whether you're just going to be getting married and you're dreaming ahead to your marriage, I believe that our marriages can actually be amazing, fulfilling relationships that we have. But the truth is, most marriages aren't. And the reason they aren't, is I believe, is because we're not spiritually ready or prepared to be married. And the truth is this, is that marriage is a beautiful thing, and the truth is the movies have created a lie that we believe. The lie is this, is that your life won't be fulfilled until you find the one. And then when you find the one, you realize that this is a lot of work. But everything from Disney to romantic movies show scenes of where the boy and the girl, and you complete me. find each other up, on the tower just at the nick of time. Let me save you the trouble of watching Hallmark movies, for example. They're all the same. There's a relationship. It's rocky. Save your time. It always works out. Because it's a movie. And it's not real. Movies have created this lie that you complete me. But here's something that we need to remember. We're going to go over 4 vows that I'm asking everybody in this room to take. Whether you're in a relationship, whether you're in a marriage, whether you're preparing for a relationship, or whether you're a youth that's dreaming about being married later. We got to remember something, that this lie of that we need to meet the one. We need to remember this, that God is your one. Your spouse is the second. The Bible says this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with your strength and your soul, then love your neighbor as yourself. What's he saying? Love me first, people second. That applies to us in our marriages, to our relationships. We get on very dangerous ground when we say, you know what, we do it with all different relationships. Oh, my kid, they're my life. Let's look a little higher. That God needs to be one. Everything else has a place under that. And the moment we get those priorities out of whack, vow number 1, write it down. I promise God will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. You can start this today if you're married. You can start this in preparation for when you get married. Or if you are dating, you can figure this out right now. If you have been married and you're not married and you don't want to be married ever again, and again, no, I was going to say, get an amen, but I know some people would amen. And so, but you can still apply this to your life. God needs to be first. In the Old Testament it says that there was no suitable helper for Adam, so God put him asleep, and it took a rib from his side and formed woman. It says this in Genesis 2:24. That is why a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and they will become one flesh. Leaves. That's why a man leaves. The Hebrew word for leaves, the root of that word is azab. It means to loosen or relinquish, to move away from and to. God is your one. Your spouse is second. When you make your spouse your first, you are asking them to do something that they cannot do. You are asking your spouse to fulfill something in your life and in your heart that is impossible for them to do. And then you begin to resent them. You begin to be upset at them. You begin to say, why have you failed me? But our spouse cannot fulfill what only God can fill. Asking them to do something they can't. We do this with our kids. You are my life. You are the most important thing. But here's the truth. What attracts us to people, if we're not careful, the very thing that attracted us to them will annoy us about them. And all the ladies giggle. Because we know that I've heard ladies say, oh, I want to date this guy. He's so mysterious. And he's just quiet and he doesn't talk a lot. And he's so mysterious. And then they get married and they're like, this guy is annoying because he never talks and I never know what he's thinking. What we idolize, later on sometimes we'll demonize. And we do that because we're trying for them to be our one. But God is our one. Or men will say, oh man, she's amazing. Like she's like amazing cook and she's so organized and she runs everything so good, or whatever the case may be, and she can work and she does this and blah, blah. And then they get married and they're like, she's a control freak. One time what we idolize, if we're not careful, we'll demonize. And when we're dating, We often keep our person we're dating as our first priority. And then kids come along and maybe you don't have any time for God and no time for each other. You throw yourself into work and kids and your image, and you try to raise money so you can buy things. I want you to know that nobody that I've ever encountered in my 21 years of ministry on their deathbed has ever said, I wish I had granite countertops. Nobody. No one has ever said, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have. Everybody that I've ever encountered in their last days of life, there's only two things that matter: God and family. Nothing else matters. And we need to put God first. I mean, children are important. But if you could hear me this morning, children are not as important as marriage. If you want to love your kids, invest in your marriage. Children are a temporary assignment. I have 2 children. One is 19. She's almost gone. Am I sad? No. You know why? I have fulfilled that part of my assignment. I have a son who's 14. He's got about 24 years left at the house. And when that is over. But children are a temporary assignment. Marriage is a lifetime commitment. We want your children to have successful marriages. Model it in front of them. The truth is that men have a natural, and this is a blanket statement, but men have a natural feeling or desire to protect. Men will generally die for the ones that they love. I'd like to speak to the men in this room. If you are here, it is your responsibility to protect the priorities in your life, in your marriage. Your wife has her own, has similar priorities, but you need to protect this priority, that God is first for me, everyone else is second. Your role is to protect the priorities. You need to do everything with your power to protect this. You need to lay down your life for 2 things, for Christ and for your spouse. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Ephesians 5:25. If you are a spouse here today, or you're in a relationship or preparing, be someone who prays, that attends church, that's involved in a small group, that studies his word. If you're married here today, take time to be and spend time. Make your spouse your number 2 priority. And I know I'll say, you know what, you need to go on a date night. And people will be like, yeah, I can't afford a date night. Borrow a tent. Pitch it in the backyard. You can either make an excuse or you can make a way. But you can't do both. It's so easy to make an excuse. If you're single here today, whether you're single as a child, a youth, or an older adult, or a young adult, if you are single here today, you need to make that same promise to God. I promise you will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. You will not believe the lie that you have to find the one. God is the one. Make that your prayer. Write it down. Promise. I vow that you will be my first priority and my spouse, or my eventual spouse, will be second. Vow number 2. How many have ever made a fool out of yourself for love? I remember when I was in college and I was pursuing Penny. She was very resistant. Can't imagine. But she was. And I pursued her. There was nothing that I wouldn't do. I was not going to stop until she was mine. Not as a possession, but as the one that I was going to spend my life with. I was not going to stop. And so I would get these big boxes. One time I got this big box and a bunch of little boxes, and I made this mixed tape. I put it in the smallest box and then wrapped it in a whole bunch of other boxes till it was a big box. And then I shipped it to her in the mail, so she got it through the school's mail. I remember that I made this big card for her, and this card, I knew she was artistic, and I'm not artistic at all, but I'm like, I'm going to pursue her. I'm going to show her how artistic I am. And I was like, I started to draw, and I drew this card, and it took me hours and hours and hours to color this thing in by hand. You know, there was no computers back then. That's how old I am. I didn't have a computer, so I had to color it in. And I would sit in the dorms till late in the night talking to my friends and drawing. And my friends would be like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, she needs to be mine. Everyone has similar stories. Back in the day when our phones were attached to the wall on a rope, do you remember those days? Do you remember that you would fall asleep in bed listening to them and you would just be breathing? Like not in a weird way like people do now, but like just breathing. Just like, be like, are you sleeping? No, I'm not sleeping. You hang up. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. By nature, we pursue what we don't have. Everyone here has similar stories. Have you ever seen anything improve by being lazy? Have you seen your yard get better and greener by being lazy? Have you ever seen your house get cleaner by being lazy? The first vow was, I promise that God will be my first and my spouse will be my second. Second vow is this: I promise to always pursue my number two. In verse 24 again, it says this in Genesis 2:24. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife, that they become one flesh. United. The root word in Hebrew is dabak. Dabak. It means to cling or to adhere or to stick to. To catch or pursue. To pursue hard with affection and devotion. In Hebrew, words were not just words, they were kind of these pictures. Dabak is translated in other areas as well in the Bible, like this. In Psalm 63:8, I will follow behind you. In Job 41:17, they are joined fast one to another. They cling together. They cannot be parted. They pursued hard after them in Judges 20:45. In the Bible, there's an amazing story of pursuit, and it's between Gomer and Hosea. And Hosea is a prophet, and he takes a lady to be his wife, and her name is Gomer. Let's just take a moment and be thankful that her name is not Gomer. But he takes her as his wife, and she was a prostitute. And she kept leaving him to go back to her old life. And just like Jesus, he kept pursuing her. And he would go back and take her out of the darkest places. This idea of pursuing. If you're not married or if you're dating, here's some advice. Never date someone who takes you for granted. Ladies that are not married in this place, is he pursuing you? Does he get dressed up, spend some money on you? Man, is she pursuing you with her words and with her actions? But here's the truth. If you are not married, you are worth pursuing. Don't let anybody else tell you any different. Here's the number one thing that we need to try to do. Everyone knows, everyone has intentions. Everyone has intentions. And here we have intentions, and here we have actions. How many have ever heard the old song that the road to hell is paved with good intentions? We need to be people who are willing to close the gap between intentions and action. Almost everybody in this room has good intentions. Here's 3 things that you can do to help close the gap between intentions and action. I don't want to say this is mostly for men, but this is mostly for men. Number 1, when you think something good, say it. Doesn't that sound simple? But when you think something good, say it. It says this in Hebrews 3:13. Encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. That encouragement can actually cause your heart to not be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. When you think something good to say, say it. I'm going to talk about some things today that I'm not very good at. This one, I'm really good at. Just want to make that known. But pursue with your words of affection, your encouragement. Men, pursue her with words of affection. I'm going to say something to men, predominantly to men, not always, but predominantly. Pursue her with non-sexual words of affection. I know you men, you haven't heard non and sexual in the same sentence very often. Non-sexual pursuit of affection. I mean, the thing with men is men are different than women. Women dream about the day, and men dream about twice a day. Men can make anything perverted. And all the men are like, what are you talking about? If a lady's like, hey, don't forget, we gotta rotate our tires. A guy will be like, I'll rotate your tires. That's men. You know, can you load the dishwasher? I'll load your dishwasher. Like, what is this? This is not the pursuit of affection. That is not a pursuit of affection. Can all the ladies say amen? Amen. That is selfish. Non-sexual words of affection. Non-sexual pursuit. Here's a hint for men and women. You should, when you say things that are kind and nice to your wife or your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you know, so we always say, well, I love you. Here's just a little practical piece of advice. Right at the end of I love you, put the word because. I love you because. And then state something that you love about them. Pursue them with non-sexual words of affection. I love you because of this. And we both can do that. Ladies, pursue your husband with words of affirmation. Here's the actual truth. Every single Sunday, and I'm going to be honest with you, every single Sunday, I hope you enjoy it, but I only really care if my wife thinks I did well. I don't care about anything else. I hear God is proud of me, and I care if she is proud of me. So we'll get in the car, and the truth is, most of the time, I live just down the road, about 2 minutes, and most Sundays, I will hold my breath the whole way, just hoping she'll say, you did a good job. Men, pursue with words of affection. Ladies, pursue him with words of affirmation. Ladies, remember that he is becoming what you see in him. What you say about him will create who he becomes. Choose your words to him very, very carefully. Don't tell him what he is not. Tell him who you see him becoming. Build your husband and build your wife up spiritually. Men, she wants to know. Women want to know, do you love me today? Ladies, men want to know, do you believe in me today? Women want to know, do you love me today? Men want to know, do you believe in me today? When you think of something, make sure you say it. Number 2, when you think of something special, do it. Here's the part I'm not so good at. If anyone then knows what's good, he ought to do it and doesn't do it, it's sin for them, James 4:17 says. When you think of something to do for your spouse, don't just think about it. Do it. Because if you don't do it, you're robbing them. You know, you can come home early, you can grab takeout, you can go to the park, you can buy tickets to the game. Guys, if you have little kids, you can bathe them, you can do the dishes. A little bit of advice for men: if you're going to send your wife flowers, send it somewhere where other women can see. Because that's double the points if other women see it. I don't know how that works, but if you make other women jealous, it's extra. Fill the tank with gas, write a thoughtful note, make the bed. Number 3, when you want something different, be something different. Now this is the hardest one, because we say things like, when he does this, then I'll do this. Or when she stops, I'll start. When you want something different, be something different. Don't complain about what your spouse is not. Continue to grow into who you are supposed to be. It doesn't matter if you're 13, 14, 15. Grow into God, who God has called you to be. Here's a good example. Maybe you're here and one of you in your house so in our house, sometimes in the evening, our discussions will be about someone who's on their phone. And I'm not going to say who that is, but someone is on their phone. And one thing is you can do is you can either nag the person to death about not being on their phone. That's one way you could handle it. From past experience, it doesn't work that well. The second way you could do it is you could put your phone away yourself and be totally laser focused. Instead of trying to complain the behavior away, what if you just became who you wanted them to be? That didn't get a lot of amens. To get what you've never had, you must do what you've never done. To get what you once had, you must go back and do what you once did. It says that in Revelation 2:5. Remember the height from which you've fallen, repent, and do the things that you first did. That applies in a lot of different ways in our life. Vow number 3, the vow of partnership. Everyone, generally we marry someone opposite. And I said this earlier, but in dating, opposites attract. In marriage, opposites attack. You marry someone and you say, oh, I married him because he's funny and he's always the life of the party and it's so fun. Now she's like, you're obnoxious. You think you're the funniest person in every room, and if you're not, you want to take your ball and go home. You should be careful. Because Satan wants to divide us. But God uses our differences to strengthen us. But Satan wants to use them to divide us. So remember, the first vow was this: I promise that God will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. Number 2, I promise I will always pursue number 2. And number 3 is this: I promise my marriage will be about we and not me. We are so selfish. We're so selfish in all of our relationships. Genesis 2:24, again it says, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife, and they become one flesh. The word united, ekad, it means completely joined as one. Satan wants to divide that, but God wants to use your strengths. It says this in Matthew 19:4-6. For this reason a man will leave his father and be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Matthew 19:4-6. What we need to understand is that marriage is a covenant, not a contract. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. A contract is based on mutual distrust. We draw contracts to protect me in case you do wrong. I'm in if you're in. That's a contract. You do those up if you're going to rent a house to someone or rent an apartment to someone. You make up a contract to protect yourself. A covenant is based on mutual commitment. The word for that is Grce, and it actually means cutting and binding. That it's blood, a contract, or a covenant. You need to understand this, that we are all either practicing marriage or we're practicing divorce. This is a covenant. You're either practicing marriage or you're practicing divorce. Choose wisely. The truth is, we've made a vow to be in this for rich or for poor, for sickness and health. Mutual commitment is not 50-50, it's 100%. Even if they don't give 100. Now that's hard, but that's what he's called us to do. Marriage is not dividing everything in half, it's giving everything you've got. Do unto others as Christ did for you. Covenant, a partnership. And I hear men say this all the time, yeah, but she doesn't respect me. Let me respectfully say this. Give her something to respect. And she will respect you. I promise you something, that your schedule is not busier than our schedule. I promise you that Satan attacks us as much as he attacks you. I promise you that my sinful flesh is as strong as yours. I promise you that we've made as many mistakes. We've sinned against God and we've hurt each other. But this is a covenant that we have vowed to be in. Your marriage will be as good as both of you decide that it will be. It's also important to remember that marriage is not measured by feelings. It's measured by commitment. It's not about feelings. If I had $1 for every day that Penny said something to the effect of, I love you, but I don't really like you today. I hear people say, well, I'm not happy and we don't love each other, I'm out of love. Getting divorced because you ran out of love is like selling your car because you ran out of gas. We are in this. The third vow, I promise this is about we and not me. Vow number 4. Nobody is in this room that's married or hoping to get married or preparing for marriage in a few years. No one before they got married thinks, man, you know what, I think I'm going to get married and then I'm going to ruin that marriage with adultery. Or you know what, I think what would be really helpful for my marriage when I get married down the road is if I was addicted to pornography, that would help. No one says, you know what, I'm going to have an emotional affair. Nobody makes these plans ahead of time. Almost nobody, and I can't say no one, but almost nobody plans to wreck a marriage with sin. But it happens all the time. It's difficult to build a life of righteousness on a foundation of sin. It says this in Genesis 2:24-25. That's why man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife. They become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. The word shame here in the original language is bouctouche. To be ashamed, to feel completely worthless. Then it says this in Genesis 3:7-10. Then their eyes were opened, and they realized that they were naked because they had sinned. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. But the Lord called to them, where are you? He answered, I heard you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked I was naked. I hid, Adam said, because I was ashamed. Everyone in this room, you've done something wrong and you felt ashamed. Everybody in this room. And you believe a lie, and the lie is this: the only way to protect myself and to stay safe is to hide and to keep whatever I've done a secret. I can't let him or her know. I can't let them know what my secret battles are. Write this down. Secrecy is the enemy of intimacy. Secrecy is the enemy of intimacy, or of closeness. Vow number 1, I promise that God, you will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. I promise, number 2, I will always pursue my 2. Number 3, I promise my marriage will be about we and not me. Number 4, I promise to confide in you, not hide from you. It says this in Ephesians 5:8, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of the light. For the light of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them, Ephesians 5:8. I mean, everyone here probably has gone to the movie theater. And you know when you go to the movie theater and you're out in the lobby and all the lights are bright, or you come from outside, and then you walk into the movie theater and it's dark. You move away from the light, you walk into the darkness, and you think, oh, and you have to stop because it's so dark in there. But if you wait long enough, your eyes adjust. Right? If you wake up in the middle of the night, and you go to move and you open your eyes, and you're like, if you just wait long enough, if you just stay in the darkness long enough, you'll adjust. That is just like sin. If you stay in the darkness long enough, you'll adjust and you won't even realize you're in the darkness. You won't realize how sinful you are until you start to come back to the light. And then you're like, oh, it's so bright. But the truth is, you never find healing in the dark. You've got to bring your sin to the light. Shame grows best in the dark. It says this in Ephesians 5:3, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality among you of any kind of impurity. What is impurity? Impurity is poison, and you need to stay away from impurity. Jesus said in Matthew 5:27-28, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. When I was 19 years ago, I remember the day like it was yesterday. I remember Penny, we found out she was pregnant. We thought she had the flu, and we found out she was pregnant. And I remember it was like yesterday. And we were excited, and then I can't remember what happened exactly, but at night she went to bed. And I was up and I was watching just television. It wasn't like 3 in the morning, it was just like, 11 or whatever it was. And I was just flipping through the television. And something came on the television that I should not be watching. And I stopped. And I watched it. And I didn't just watch it for 5 seconds, I watched it. And some time went by, and I don't know what happened, but I turned off the television and I go to walk, and I walked around the corner, and there she was standing. She was watching me the whole time. There was nothing I could say. I was caught. I was so sorry. She said, was it worth it? God, to be pure and live in the light. problem is the line of sin is in the wrong place. We read Matthew chapter 5 and say, do not commit adultery, but we remember that Jesus says, then we think that's the line. The Old Testament line of do not commit adultery. But what we need to understand is that the actual sin line is way back here. But we don't know because we've been in the darkness so long. Our eyes haven't adjusted. See, it's not about the act of adultery. It's about looking at the person at the gym with lust in your eyes. See, we've moved the line. It's not about that you had conflict with somebody. It's that the line is moved and you just ignored all the lines. And it was actually sin way back here. And God tells us that he will put warnings in our path to help us, but we ignore them. And we just say, oh, well, I didn't commit adultery, but we do things emotionally. We hide text conversations. But the line of sin is in the wrong place. We say, well, we don't commit adultery, but we lust at someone in the gym, or pursue someone at work, or fantasize in your heart, or read romance novels. I mean, Jesus was quite extreme. He said, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your arm does something, cut it off. Like, good thing it wasn't literal, or we'd be all like one-armed cyclopses walking around. But he's saying that's how serious this is. In Proverbs 5, it says this, 5 and 8, keep a path far from her, talking about this adulterous woman. Don't go near the door of her house. But that's the problem. We like to go as close to sin as we can, and then we wonder why we get sucked in. We go as close to impurity as we think we can go. And then we say, oh, I can't believe God didn't help me out. You walk through all the lines. In our house, there's no secrets. There's no hidden passwords. Phones are available to everyone. You say, and you hear this thing, you say, how do I stay pure? It says this in Psalm 119, 9-11, this is David. How can a young person stay on the path of purity? This applies to all of us. By living in your word. I seek you with all of my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I have an exercise that I do, and I know there's lots of pastors that do this in particular. But when I'm tempted, I have this exercise that I do, and this is it. I imagine myself having to sit down my children. Say, your dad has betrayed your mother. I realize that I'm actually breaking the heart of God, that I'm dragging the name of Christ through the mud. That one day I will meet God face to face and I will give him account. That I would lose my reputation, my ministry. I would lose Penny's unconditional trust. And I would inflict untold hurt to many people. Secrecy is the enemy of intimacy. If we are holding secrets, it's impossible to be intimate properly with our spouse or intimate properly with God. The sexiest thing a man can do is not stress out a woman. It says this in Proverbs 28:13. Whoever conceals their sin does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. Confess and receive mercy. See, the truth is, we're children of light. We're no longer children of darkness. How can I stay pure? Living according to his word, listening to his spirit. 4 vows for us today. I vow that God will be my one, and that my spouse will always be number 2. That I always pursue 2. That marriage is not about me. it's about we. That I will confide in you, not hide from you. Marriage is not something, I don't believe, that's meant to be endured and just tolerated. I believe that God has something so beautiful in the story of marriage. That I believe that our marriages in this room can be so amazing that our marriages would actually draw people to Christ. That they would be a picture of Christ in the church. So this morning we're going to just close together. And I would really encourage you to write down those vows that we made today. I would encourage you to text any questions to that number that you might have. We'll try to handle them over the series. But as we lead in this one last song in closing, I would pray that you would just, if you have a spouse here, that you would be with them. That you would just make these 4 vows, that God would be my one. That I will seek him over everything. That my spouse will be second. But I will always pursue the one that I love, my spouse. The marriage is not about me. It's about we. And if you have something that's hidden in your heart today, that you are not remaining in purity, that you would confide and not hide. I promise to confide in you and not hide from you. So as we worship together, I would encourage you just to let what we've talked about today just sink into your heart. And go home and have a conversation with your spouse. And just let God be number one in your life.